What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of The Chronic Couch. Y'all already know what I always say. Y'all tired of hearing from me and Eric, so we're bringing you yet another guest. Today is my boy, Greg Holdsman. He is a fellow basketball player, actually, in the LA area. Greg and I met playing in the Culver City Basketball League, and that was, a couple of years ago now. And, like your teams and our teams, we always win at it. We're pretty much like the more physical team, so we'd always just get super competitive. But yeah, like it's always fun with episodes like this because you come across so many different people when you're either, in Eric's case, when you're in entertainment, or if you're in sports, you just have all these unifying mediums. So the fact that we're able to create magic outside of our respective arenas, if you will, is always fun to me. So, with that being said, like I said, I want to welcome you, Greg, to the Chronic Couch. And I want you to not only introduce yourself, but tell the people why you are here on the Chronic Couch, because everybody always has something going on. And I like to let people tell their story first.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Eric. First, does your audience know how much of a hooper you are, Chris? I'll one quick story from the league. So, I mean, it is a bunch of, I wouldn't say washed up guys, but guys, past our primes, I would say. But there's a bunch of good former college hoopers in the league. And I think my team probably had 3 or 4 of them. And we were up by probably 12 points with maybe a minute and 18 seconds left in a game maybe a year and a half ago. And I think Chris maybe had 4 straight and ones and a game-winning turnaround jumper to win by 1. So they probably had a 13-0 run within let's say a 90-second span. That's the type of player that Chris is. So he was by far the best player in the league.
Well, I definitely appreciate that. Now, for our fans out there who know very little about sports, at least they know once upon a time, your boy had a little juice left in the tank. But no, I appreciate it, bro.
And then thanks for having me on. So I'm from Philly, born and raised, and I rep that with a lot of pride. I'm actually moving back to Philly in about a month from LA. After 6 years, just miss home, miss family, miss friends. But I'll be back in LA, every now and then. I played college basketball for about a year and a half, and I got 4 concussions in that span. And the last kind of couple took me about 4 years after that to recover from. So I spent probably age 20 to 24 in a pretty dark place. And it took me quite a while to kind of get back to feeling like myself. And then another 2 or 3 years after that to start really playing basketball again. And now I feel great and I'm playing multiple times a week. But a good part of my 20s were kind of dedicated to trying to recover from the post-concussive symptoms.
Yeah, I mean, for everybody out there who knows anything about concussions, and if you've ever had one, that initial shock is, first of all, just a shock again to your system. But then, that first 24 hours, 48 hours, a lot of what you hear in the post-concussion protocol from the NFL and the NBA, it can be scary, right? Because you're seeing these flickerings, and you're getting sometimes these really bad migraines. I know when I had a concussion before, my PT, or not my PT, but my athletic trainer, she was saying, well, you can't really get a full night's sleep because you could slip into a coma. So, you got to be woken up every couple of hours. So, I mean, in terms of you getting these concussions, Greg, what were the mechanisms? Were they just random elbows? Were you hitting your head on the floor? I mean, I kind of just want to give people a better picture of how these things tend to happen.
Yeah, I mean, they're also different. And to your point about the more serious ones where you kind of can't go to sleep in that first night, that was only my first one. And honestly, it took me 5 days to recover from that one. I had no idea really what a concussion was, but I got hit with a shoulder in a game. To this day, don't really remember the next couple hours. I don't remember how I got to the hospital or any of that. And I had a bunch of short-term memory stuff within the first 24 hours. I had to have signs in the college infirmary to where the bathrooms were, because I kept forgetting. And that was kind of scary, but I kind of forgot about it because I healed so quickly, and it was just kind of something that was scary for a moment, and then it was over. And then fast forward 7 months to the start of my sophomore season, or actually the start of the school year, so like September, in an open gym, got hit with another shoulder by my own teammate. And this time I didn't black out. Everything seemed somewhat normal. I just felt like something was off. And what I later found was that symptom is called fogginess, where like I just kind of, something wasn't right. But because it wasn't as clear cut as that first one, I just kind of kept on with my normal life. I kept playing in that same open gym. I lifted the next morning. I went out the next night. And all of a sudden, 3 days later, I did not feel better at all. And then that lasted for 4 months, like dealing with those symptoms. I missed like the entire season. Kind of got cleared and got like better. Like something still wasn't quite right. And I think what happened there was the fogginess went away, but that's when like depression set in. I think I didn't know what depression was at the time. So I couldn't pinpoint like what didn't feel right. And then I was going to transfer schools that spring, and I was in the weight room like the start of the summer, and slammed a medicine ball, and it came up and hit me in the face. And that was my third one. And that's when like officially basketball was over. And that was the start of like the kind of 3-4 year journey, because the symptoms just kind of spiraled from there. And like there may have been a couple other bumps like after that may or may not have been concussions. And we can kind of get into it, because what I later learned like 4 years later was that so much of what I was going through was psychological, and like actually nothing structurally wrong with me or my brain. Nevertheless, the symptoms were completely real. They just were caused psychologically and not physically. So I'm sure there's like lots to go in there with that, but I'll pause there.
My initial thing I have to say is like, bravo to you for just saying this out loud. I think a common theme that Chris and I have honed in on is, 2 dudes, now 3 dudes talking about depression. And before we dive into what you were about to say, what was the leading factor or the leading force, the driving force for you that led you through the tunnel and got you ultimately to the other side? Was it what was it that got you to the other side?
Well, the other side of like the injury or what?
The depression.
I don't know if I am on the other side, to be honest.
Okay, that's honest. That's honest and real. So what do you do every day to keep it moving, to keep the engine, oiled up?
Yeah, I mean, for a while, I think I associated the depression and anxiety that kind of formed. I associated it directly with the effects of the concussion. But as I've like done more self-work and more therapy, I've like, it's possible that like it's kind of the chicken or the egg situation. Like I think it all may have been leading up. And the reason why my symptoms kind of started from these hits was, yes, maybe the initial impact of like the changing brain chemicals from actually getting knocked. But then like I may have been like kind of more predisposed to getting these symptoms from depression, anxiety that predates the concussion. So that's to say that. But now like I do take, medication, and that seems to like, stable me out. But do a lot of, therapy type of stuff. I'm trying to get back into meditation. Honestly, playing basketball again has been a huge help. So I would say I'm on the other side, in the sense that like I'm no longer in kind of like a perpetual dark place. And I have like, good days and bad days, and I feel pretty even keeled. But I certainly still feel like I have depression, and that may never go away, but I feel like I understand it more, and I think I'm better at living with it. But I think I would love to say there will be a time where I say I'm on the other side, and I feel like all of this, is in large part behind me. And even though I'm like 4 or 5 years like healthy now, I still feel like I'm still in that journey in a sense.
I feel that I was a gymnast, and I had a pretty serious back injury, and I have so much, PTSD from the sport and what it's led to and what it's evolved into. And for so long, I did not want to talk about gymnastics. I didn't want to watch the Olympics. I would get triggered if my family would ask me questions. And now as I'm continuing to heal, I can't do the crazy flips that I used to do, but like if I can do some handstand push-ups against the wall, it feels good. So, I don't have a follow-up question for you, but in that sense, like I relate to you, and I'm glad that you are back to playing some ball, because it's hard. And I think what I want people to understand, and I hope people can relate to, is a lot of the time, like athletes are left in ruins, especially the athletes that don't make it to the top where they have this huge platform where they can monetize and bring in money and form a living off of. But like myself, like, I was almost there. So again, just hats off to you for getting back in the sport. And how long was it from when what was the time period from when you got hurt and then you decided to pick up a basketball again? And was that process hard?
It was incredibly. I had basically accepted that I just wouldn't play again. And I accepted in terms of like I verbally accepted, but like it still was like weighing very hard on me. But like I thought for sure like I just probably wouldn't play again, because there was a period of time where like anytime I would like even like sit back in a chair and my head would like hit a wall lightly, like I would like have symptoms that would spiral again. So I thought my brain was extremely delicate. And again, I later learned that like that wasn't completely psychological, but it's like still took me so long to get to that point. But when I finally did, so what happened was my first job in LA, I worked as a podcast producer for this very niche company that specialized in content for rare disease, specifically bleeding disorders, which I knew nothing about, but it got me to LA and got me a job. But then I did produce one podcast called The Pain Pod, and it was all about chronic pain and all the theories that come along with that. And we had one doctor on the podcast, maybe in the first season, that talked about this theory called TMS, or tension myoneural syndrome, which I think it may have been rebranded since then to mean something else. It's basically mind-body syndrome. And it's the scientific theory that your body can produce real pain by nothing structurally wrong with you, basically. And the original theory is from a guy named John Sarno, who was like a back pain doctor. I think like Howard Stern and Larry David were his clients and people like that.
Send me the number, bro. Send me the number.
I think, I don't think he's currently alive. But I read a book by him. But basically, I learned about this theory, and I began testing it on myself and like really understanding the science behind it. And for a lot of people that discover this theory, just reading the book or certain literature on it, their symptoms like clear up just by reading it, because they like understand how this is possible. For some others, it takes more deeper work. But once I understood it, my dad was visiting me out in LA, and it was like a month before the pandemic hit, and we were out Venice Beach, and some guys challenged us to 2-on-2. And my dad was like, Greg, like, do you want to give it a go? And so this was like February of 2020. My initial injury was 2016. So yeah, like 4.5 years. And I played, and I didn't get hurt, and I was terrified, but I kind of got through it, and I slowly got back into it from there.
Yeah, that's 4 years, man. I mean, like I said, I can only imagine the journey in that first instance of being able to get back out there. I mean, you know how it is rolling in Venice. Somebody always got something to say. They want to challenge you. And I know your pops, he was probably with the shits, from what I can understand. So
no, it was definitely fun. I think I hit I think I hit a game-winning shot in the corner with like, you know, the ocean breeze blowing behind me. Like it felt great. But I mean, it was truly terrifying because basically the main symptom I had for 4 years was I had a bunch, but the main one was, again, it was called fogginess or dissociation, which basically feels like you're drunk and hungover at the same time for 24 hours a day. And it's just like a really, I wouldn't even call it pain. It's just like extreme discomfort. And you just don't feel like yourself. It's like a dream state, but it's, you know, it's more like a nightmare.
It's
out
of body. You're in a different dimension. I've been there.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty brutal. Especially when like you don't really have breaks from it. Like I would go to sleep and like that would be my break from it, because like when you're sleeping, you're not foggy, but then like I would have like a nightmare in my dream, but in the nightmare I was clear-headed. I would wake up and it'd be a worse nightmare because I would be even my normal life, but I would feel so awful. So that lasted for a long time, and honestly, like antidepressants helped with the symptom a bit. And I did like every type of therapy you can imagine. I did physical therapy, ocular therapy, vestibular therapy. I went to a treatment center in Orlando for a week and took a semester off of school. I was like trying anything. And like I could never really pinpoint what was working and what wasn't. But the thing that really like ultimately got me over the edge to like not feel foggy again was this understanding of this mind-body syndrome, and like psychologically getting myself to a point where even though if I play basketball, for example, and this happened in the league plenty of times, Chris, in my first couple of years, where I would get hit, and for the next week I would have symptoms, like real concussion symptoms, but I would know they weren't from concussion, and that's why they would disappear in a week and not 4 months later, just by understanding it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too, because I think one of the other terms is psychosomatic. Is, you know, you have like, I know a lot of work behind that, because I've had similar situations, right, where you just, you know, you think that something's wrong, so guess what, your body's like, oh yeah, something's wrong, and it results in these physical sensations that are often uncomfortable. And you touched on something a while back, and I kind of want to just loop it back because I think it's super important, not only for an education standpoint, because selfishly, something that I struggled with was similar to what you said before about maybe you thought you knew what depression was before you actually experienced it. Similar boat with me. But for our listeners out there who may not be able to necessarily identify some of the depression symptoms, and I understand that depression is different for everybody, but my first question is, how did depression show itself to you?
It's a good question. And some of it might be blended with anxiety. That's hard to like parse out what's what. For me, it was like I remember technically being healthy and like not concussed anymore for a period of time. And I would do things that like used to make me feel a certain way. And I can't like pinpoint what those feelings were. But like, even if I was, you know, playing in a game and like hit a shot, like I used to like get this feeling inside me that it just didn't come. And I just felt kind of flat. And that was an early signal. Certainly getting far less sleep was a signal. And just feeling a sense of like hopelessness and helplessness that I'd never kind of experienced before. And a large part of that may be because it was the first time in my life where I felt like completely out of control. Like I couldn't help me. My parents couldn't help me. Like I was seeing all these doctors. They were kind of like, you should be getting better, but you're not. So I felt like totally at the mercy of the universe in a lot of ways, and wasn't too optimistic that was going to help me at all either. So I think it was like that level of like hopelessness and helplessness that I was like, yeah, something is different than it used to be.
Okay. And then for the second part, you kind of touched on it as well a little bit earlier, but when you did start these different types of therapies and then you started these medications, you said they helped a little bit. Were any of them a catalyst that kind of helped you get to where you are today, even though you may not be quote unquote through it? Have there been things that you've been able to either take, or just new routines or habits that you've been able to form that make you just feel a little bit better?
Yeah, I think really, and this is not for all people with concussions. This is just because I I think you heal from concussions within a few weeks. Like your brain just like it, 99% of people, your brain actually does heal. Yes, people have symptoms after that, but I really genuinely believe that they are similar to me, where it is more of a psychosomatic thing. So yeah, some of those therapies that I did could potentially help in those first few weeks and maybe even a little bit afterwards. But for me, I don't think any of them did, aside from the antidepressants and kind of like fixing the kind of the chemical imbalance in my brain. And that was probably one of the main causes of the foggy feeling that I had. Like the foggy feeling may have been more a depressive symptom and less of a concussion symptom.
So yesterday, I went to the beach, and going out right now is like a monumental thing in my, quote unquote recovery. And I was the only dude, laying on the towel because, it hurts to stand on the sand. And like, I was what most people probably saw as antisocial, but really I was just taking in the waves and the sun. And I'm curious, what was your social circle like during this time? And like, did you lean on your friends? Did your friends say they understood, but they really, they don't understand? Did they, did you lose friends? Did you shed some friends off? What was that journey like?
It's a great question. Two things on that. One is that I think it's hard because when you have chronic pain, you are rightfully so like extremely selfish. Like everything is about you and how you are trying to feel better.
But sorry to interject, but getting to that point where you can say that is what's the word I'm looking for? It takes a lot of time. For me, at least, it took time to be selfish and to own that and to be in that.
Yeah, no, it's a tough place to be, especially if you're not inherently a selfish person. But along those lines, like maybe only a couple actually pretty bad decisions, but like I would make decisions in that period of my life that I knew I wouldn't make if I were like healthy. And like I remember just like having conversations with friends and being like I'm here because like I want to be like social, and like I would rather, in some senses, like rather be out with you guys than like in the house, but like I'm not me right now. And like it was like really important for like me to, it was really important for me to know that my friends and people closer to me knew that I wasn't myself. It was almost, maybe that's kind of like a crutch is the wrong word, but it was almost like the excuse is like I need to be here for me because I need to like be in the world, but like I don't want this to be a reflection of who I am, type of thing. Which is like really hard because like you're kind of living but not living at the same time. Like I hate to say, I go back and forth. Sometimes I look at those years and be like, those were like just wasted years because that wasn't really me living in the world. But at the same time, it's like that's not true at all. Like it's a huge part of my story, and it's a huge reason why I'm here today. And I did make incredible strides personally and professionally during those years. But at the same time, I just know that like I think, feel, and make decisions completely differently when I feel good versus when I feel like I'm in, chronic pain or chronic discomfort.
Right. I mean, it's definitely, like you said, it's a tough world to live in, right? And I just think that it sounds like you had the right people around who understood the situation, because I think a lot of people unfortunately have, the term unconditional love, is usually reserved for our parents. But, a lot of friends, especially here in LA, or if you're in like a new city, it can be conditional. So, oh, we don't want to hang out with Greg because he's not himself today. It didn't seem like you had that. It seemed like your people were like, or unless you did, correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I felt that more. Like I felt like, damn, like I'm probably a huge buzzkill right now. And like every conversation I had was like about my health, basically. And like I became kind of obsessive about it, and it kind of, I don't know whether it actually made me feel better or not, but at the time I thought it made me feel better just constantly talk about it. And like, yeah, even saying that now, like, makes me feel badly for the people that were around me all the time that like I just had to go through that. But like, again, speaking of being selfish, and when you're in chronic pain, like that's all you can think about. And everything else feels like completely secondary until you can get any sort of relief or feel, you know, a little bit better. So I think like I probably did have some certain selfish tendencies, and my brother probably would say many prior to the injuries, but like I think I have had to have some sort of like conscious unlearning of some of those tendencies since I've been healthy, because I know I took so much airspace and headspace with my family, with my friends during that period. So I've like made a lot of efforts to like basically counter that.
Right. What could you speak to that a little bit too, and like that last part, because I had the pleasure of meeting your dad once at the gym, and I mean he just obviously seems like a great dude all around. I mean we'll get into the stuff that y'all are doing back at home, but like the importance of just having somebody so close to you, and it seems like you and your dad are like this, and you know I think that is something to be said, because again when you're going through these situations where, in my situation, depression kind of, it meant I didn't want to get out of bed, but it also meant that my parents, my girlfriend, they were just going to be my punching bag some days, because that was how I had to get it out. You know, so essentially these ride or dies that we have built in, right? Could you speak to that relationship that you have with like your pops or your brother, like other people who really just held you down?
Yeah, I remember like a couple Thanksgivings ago, I like wrote like probably like 50 thank you emails to like people in my life that like I thought had been that for me. Like I basically said, like, I know like the last few years, like being around me hasn't been super easy. And I just want, I thank them like specifically for like what I feel like they had done with me or done for me and endured with me. My dad obviously was certainly one of those people. But it's tough because he was super, and he would probably would say to a fault, super invested in my athletic journey and personal journey. But like really like from the time I was young was like very, he was my coach growing up, and like he got a lot of his own joy out of my athletic achievements. And he would say now that like that he should have approached that differently. But it was really hard on him to not only see me lose basketball, but then to like not know how to help me feel better. And on top of that, he and my mom do not have the depression gene. So like they don't, as much as they try, they don't fully understand what that is or how that manifests or how to even help. So that's been like maybe like the only kind of major disconnect throughout like the whole process. And they've gotten so much better at like talking with me about it and like really trying to understand that like that's just like a reality of kind of what I go through. But you know, my dad and both my parents were like incredibly supportive. They really helped out financially when it came to some of these therapies that I was trying, and some of them were like pretty experimental, like this treatment center in Orlando, which, you know, to this day I don't even know if it helped at all, but that was like a huge financial burden and a week of my dad's life, you know, staying with me out there. They truly like would have done anything to like get me better. You know, it wasn't in their power at the time. The other thing that I was always very conscious of, especially, you know, now knowing the whole psychosomatic stuff, is like I kind of cringed at the idea that someone would think my symptoms weren't real. And that's why it takes a lot of people, including myself, a while to like really buy into the whole mind-body syndrome, because the first time you hear that, you think, well, there's no way, because I'm feeling something so viscerally real that it must be something in my body. So to actually like learn that like you can feel those symptoms in the exact same realness, they just aren't caused by something physical or structural. It takes a while because you want to validate, you know, what you're feeling. But no, to your original question, yeah, my both my parents and my brother went through this whole journey with me. and that could not have been easy. I don't think it was probably as hard as actually going through it, yourself. But it's second to that, for people seeing you suffer that love you, it's very hard. And then on top of that, yeah, dealing with your selfishness, dealing with the constant bitching, dealing with, your constant needs and how you're putting yourself first. So, I have forever gratitude to my family and my closest friends and everyone kind of stuck with me.
With your parents and your inner circle of 50 people, did you eventually get to a place where you were kind of not coaching them, but letting them know your boundaries or your trigger points or how to navigate approaching you, like through this, what to say, what not to say? Yo, dad, I'm in a bad mood today. I need a timeout. Or did they just kind of pick up what you were putting down?
I don't think I ever had conversations like that. I think I would be very clear with what I was feeling that day from a physical standpoint. But when it's just day after day after day, it just becomes the reality, and there is no variance. It became very important to me. Once I learned about this mind-body syndrome, for example, I read this entire book, and it became very important to me that my parents read the book too. And I don't know if they actually ever did, but it really matters to me that those closest to me understood at some level what I was going through. And yeah, I don't actually know why that was so crucial to me. It made me feel a little less alone and a little more, understood. Because I did kind of feel from certain people in my life that kind of inkling of doubt of do you really feel like this? Is it really this bad type of thing? And when you're going through it, there's nothing worse than feeling doubted like that.
Yeah,
I get it, man.
Yeah, that's something that I think is and it's one of those things, again, it shows up in people in different ways. So even people who have depression, their symptoms could be completely different, right? And I think that's just a hard case of just trying to really quantify and qualify numbers and how I'm feeling on a scale of 1 to 10 versus these emotions and everything. And I think it's that part about the book is super important to highlight, because I think, when I'm coaching my clients or whatever, we talk about the concept of sweat equity. And, if these clients feel as though I'm truly invested in their journey and I'm reading about what they've done and all these different things, I have that level of understanding. So the fact that, you have this book and this was a way to relate to you, because what I've found out in this journey, and I'm pretty sure Eric as well, and I mean, your parents too, but there's apparently nothing worse than your parents knowing you're in pain and then knowing that they can't do anything to help you. So, I mean, I think what you were saying about the book is essentially a bridge of sorts to try to just give a window into your world. And it sounds like, even, obviously they care for you before the book, but now they have this understanding so they can kind of continue to be there for you in a way that's landing for you.
Totally. I mean, there's some downsides. For example, whenever in the past several, it doesn't happen really much anymore, but in the past several years when I would play and I would get a small bump on the head and I would have a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks of some symptoms, I'd want to, tell my parents that, but after reading the book, because they know it's not, real, it's not real pain, that it's just caused psychologically, they have a little less time and energy to kind of process that. But again, that's post 4 years of dealing with it every day. So I totally understand how they want to move on with that part of all of our lives. It's tough for me, or was tough for me when I didn't feel like I was completely out of the woods. So I wasn't ready to just be I'm, life's easy now and we're done with it. But I totally understand their point of view of okay, this is kind of more of a you problem now. And they're not wrong for believing that, because I do have the tools within me at this point to get through any of what that, those symptoms, or whenever I do kind of hit my head again.
I think the beauty is, and it just from talking to you for the past little while, Greg, is it seems like you've got a solid family behind you. And thankfully I too have had that through my journey of chronic pain. What would you say to people who don't have that? What would your recommendation be for people to lean on if they don't have a solid familial support behind them?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely found a lot of solace at the start through maybe it was Facebook. I connected with like 4 or 5 people that like were also going through post-concussive syndrome and had very similar symptoms and similar frustrations with their lives and the doctors they were seeing that weren't really helping them at all. So I think like, you know, there's community for everything if you like look hard enough. So I think like finding community of people that were really, you know, could understand it at a far deeper level than my parents or friends could because they were living it. So I think that would be, you know, a suggestion. But yeah, to your point, like I feel incredibly fortunate that I had kind of a strong support system behind me.
How about for where you are today? Because again, from a timeline perspective, you know, we got 2016, injury happens. 2020, February, you and your pops out in Venice. You're kind of toe back in the pool moment.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And, you know, until when I got to meet you, you know, I'm seeing you as a fully competitive athlete, right? So obviously this progression over the last 9 years has been nothing short of amazing to begin with. But like, how do you feel and where are you now, like in your journey? Are there more good days than bad? Is it kind of just like a constant juxtaposition of good day, bad day? Like, how does the life of Greg stand today?
Well, it's funny, like I do still battle depression, anxiety, but there is not, no matter how bad of a day I'm having with depression, there's not 1 second where I would go back to the way I felt during the concussions. And I should probably think about that more often and be a little bit more grateful for where I'm at. But physically, I feel amazing. Like you said, I do play and I play competitively and I play very hard and maybe a little too hard at times. Like I would definitely characterize myself as a physical basketball player. And it just feels great to kind of feel strong and capable and powerful again. Like when I was going through it, I would just kind of fantasize about playing and I would have dreams where I was playing again. So it just feels really good to kind of be out there. And I mean, maybe I've lost a half a step, but beyond that, like I do feel like I'm as good as I ever was in a lot of ways. And that feels amazing. And then day to day, like, yeah, dealing with depression is not fun. But I think every day I learn a lot about myself and I'm kind of, as we all are, like on that self-discovery journey. And part of moving back to Philly for me is a part of that. I want to kind of reset in my life. I feel like, so I moved out here, as you know, like speaking of playing in Venice, I moved out here like a couple months before that. And that was like still towards the end of my concussion journey. And so while I do feel like I've had multiple chapters of my 20s and like obviously the pandemic is a big part of that and different jobs and whatnot and different relationships, it still feels like one long chapter to me in a lot of ways, like from the start of the concussions. So part of this move for me is like, I'm ready for that next chapter and I want to reset back home and then start thinking about the next chapter of my life, whether that is staying in Philly, whether that's going to New York, whether that's traveling for a little while, whether it's something totally different. But yeah, I think whether it's subconscious or conscious, a big part of like, yeah, this move for me is I really do want to close this chapter of my life in a lot of ways.
No, I mean, I think it's a perfect segue into the stuff that you've already built at home, you know, with especially the facilities and stuff like that. So like,
I just want to pause for a second there because I can take zero credit for that. That is fully my dad.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. Shout out to Kenny. We appreciate you opening a facility and everything. But I do want to give people a glimpse into what you're heading back to. Because again, you're from there. Mm-hmm. You moved out here to LA. You dealt with what LA has, what it is, mm-hmm. you know, and now you're going back to your roots, mm-hmm. which I think there's something beautiful in that because, you know, in times of turbulence, we often retreat to what we know. And I think for you going back home, and you just mentioned it, being able to kind of put a bow on this chapter.
Mhm.
But like, what is it about going home that is so, I don't know, it feels so, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, it just feels
Also,
right. Yeah, it just feels right. Like, it sounds like, this, you going back home is going to be the reset you need to
Mhm.
close the book and start
Mhm.
writing the new one.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think for a long time when I envisioned like going home, and every time I would go home for like holidays or whatnot, I really wanted to like recapture the feeling that I had pre-concussions, like the way I felt in high school and just kind of the way I carried myself and the way I felt about myself. And like I was always like trying to go backwards, and it never actually worked because I was just in a different phase of my life. And now when I think about going home, I am thinking completely about the future. I'm really not thinking about how I used to feel, which is positive in a lot of ways. But yeah, I mean, I love Philly. I think the people on the East Coast are just a little more my speed. There's kind of a familiarity to it. I have some really strong friends there. I don't tend to I have, in LA especially, like I have a ton of people that I poop with or hang out with, but it's very kind of like surface level, where I would say like 2 or 3 of my like 5 closest people in my life are my friends back in Philly. So that means a lot to me and to my family. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to keep my job. I'm still a podcast producer out here, and I can work completely remote, so that doesn't really change. But to Chris's point, my dad 10 years ago, like this month, had this idea to build a giant center in Philadelphia, which would be a basketball hub, but would include academics and mentorship and so many other things, including like a healthy foods commissary, mental wellness, strength and conditioning. He had previously worked at a tennis center that he did not build, but he was the CEO of, which was very similar in terms of like the whole tennis academics model. It was called Arthur Ashe. Now it's called Legacy. But he started this 10 years ago called Philadelphia Youth Basketball. And 2 years ago, they finished the completion of actually building the center. They had been running programs for like the 8 years prior, but it's amazing. It's like, I might get the number wrong. It's somewhere between 35 and $45 million that he raised to actually build it. And it's fully up and running during the days. There are programs for kids from age 4, I think, to 18. On the weekends, they house tournaments really just to kind of make money. But the real mission of the center is to kind of be a hub and a safe space for Philadelphia young people, with basketball just as kind of the medium for that. But it's really not about basketball. So I'm really fortunate to kind of have 2 parents in my life that kind of work in the nonprofit space and do a lot in their communities to make the communities that they live in and the world better. And they've been great examples for me. So that's not what I do in my work, but it is amazing to be somewhat attached to this amazing project and a really significant thing that's happening in Philly right now.
Greg, before I toss it off to Chris, I just want to say thank you. Today was one of those days where I've been stuck in bed, laying on ice. And I'm so glad that I didn't push this podcast interview, because it's just another source of validation for me, for what I'm going through and for what so many people are going through. And it takes major kahunas, I think, to pull the curtain back about what you're going through. And you've shed some much needed, probably long overdue light on everything that you've gone through. So thank you.
Of course. Thanks for having me. And I don't know your story too well. So what was your original injury?
So I was a gymnast, and just years of compounding my body led to a few herniations and some bulging discs. 3 back surgeries later, just dealing with pain, man. It's primarily nerve pain and then back pain, but it it has spiderwebbed into no sleep, depression, anxiety, just total discomfort
Have
all
the
around.
surgeries helped at all?
The surgeries bring relief to the mind-numbing extreme pain,
Mhm.
right? But it has not cured the obviously the mental state, but the nerve pain,
Mhm.
and just just the discomfort. So I'm trying to figure out my routine of cold plunge,
Mhm.
massage, stretching. It's manifested in others. We had a dope doctor on last week. I've now have urology, urine problems that
Yep.
are going on. So
What's the most out there kind of thing you've tried to help?
probably acupuncture.
Uh-huh.
And I thought it was helping until it wasn't.
Uh-huh.
Like I think I went 6 times. And that one time where she would stick the needles in, it just, I can't explain the craziness of nerve pain because it goes through your entire body up to your brain. But then again, there's many benefits of acupuncture, and the doctor we had on was hyped on the benefits of what acupuncture has on fertility. So yeah, it's been a journey. I would say, to wrap that up is just mind, body, and soul. Lighting a candle and, watching the sunset is probably the most beneficial thing for me, and walking.
Well, first of all, I'm sorry that you're dealing with that because that's brutal. I would be interested if you did read the book. I actually would be curious to just know your thoughts, or if it could like help in any minor way. Because like what you're sharing, like there are like upwards of like 5 or 6 stories from the book that I read that like speak almost exactly to what you're speaking about. That you might find even minimally beneficial.
Yeah, man, send it my way. I'm open to anything.
Yeah, no, I hear you, man. I was definitely at points where I was open to anything. If someone had told me, try heroin, it'll help you. Like I probably would have done it.
Yeah.
So I understand the desperation.
And go ahead, Chris.
I just want to get our legal team just came into my other ear and they just said we are not condoning heroin usage for chronic pain. All right, carry on.
No, I'm just gonna say, I might be biased or in the mindset of an athlete, but sometimes I think being an athlete makes things worse because you're a perfectionist, right? And when things are out of your control, you have to surrender. And that's been a huge theme of the Chronic Couch is acceptance. But on the flip side, I think athleticism gives you structure and it helps you if you can steer away from the PTSD that you might have, Greg, from all the concussions. And from my instance with gymnastics, and Chris too with basketball, I think if you can, focus on building a routine that works for you and to get you back. And again, you're not going to be the same Greg or the same Chris or the same Eric that you were before, right? But you cope and you learn as you go, and it's a day by day. So thank you again.
I mean, the acceptance is such a difficult part of it all, and something that I still struggle with. Because again, like you said, coming from an athlete's background, you're just taught to push through, and in a lot of ways, with chronic pain, that can be counter to what you actually want to do. And it's also that balance of like accepting reality and also wanting to keep improving. And sometimes you have to like really try hard to align with how those two things can work together.
Yeah, and look, I don't want to get too dark here, but like you can either push through, or the alternative is, you end it.
Yep.
Right. And for me, that, I don't want that. So pushing through is, for lack of better word, fucking challenging as fuck. And I think having a support system, and the fact that your parents and your brother have been such a constant force in your recovery is huge. And for those that don't have that, that's unfortunate. But like you said, Greg, like finding a community is key, because you get lost in the sauce here with not knowing how to navigate this. So that that's again why we Chris and I built the Chronic Couch, is to have discussions like this. I mean, I have never heard of what you've been through. I had a concussion, I think when I was like 10. I landed on my head, but that's as far as my knowledge goes. So your story is remarkable, and I think it's great that you're going back to Philly. I think I've kind of been toggling with the idea myself of going back to Atlanta. But again, thank you for shedding light on your story. And yeah, I'm glad I got off the ice pack for this, for sure.
Of course. No, again, like really appreciate you giving me the time and space to do this.
Absolutely. Well, Greg, I know we always like to end with, where can people find you? Where can people support you? This is essentially like you winning a competition, and we're giving you the stage for 60 seconds. Where can people continuously, support you? Or honestly, with some of our guests, people have reached out to them directly. So if you're comfortable with that, and there's somebody that today's episode really hits, and they have questions about concussive syndrome, if you're open to those conversations, where can people find you?
Yeah, and that's probably the best thing. I'm greg.holdsman@gmail.com. I honestly, maybe people that just don't know that I'm close with, like that I dealt with this in some ways, but like I would love to talk to more people about concussion syndromes, mind-body syndrome. I love helping people with that kind of stuff. And yeah, that's really it. If you like podcasts, I produce a comedy show called Fly on the Wall. It's like a Saturday Night Live, kind of like nostalgic show hosted by David Spade and Dana Carvey. So that's a good escape if you're dealing with chronic pain and want to laugh a little bit. But no, that's my only plug, I think.
Well, I mean, you bringing in two greats. That's a pretty damn good plug. Well, no, definitely appreciate it, Greg. Thank you for joining us today. Again, like I said, I feel like even before the episode, before we press record, I learned a lot just in terms of the concussive situation over time. Again, seeing isolated incidents is different, but psychosomatic symptoms are a real thing, and they result in a lot of ways. And I think it's very powerful to, similar to last week's episode, just have three men here talking about stigmatized things, and knowing that it's okay to not be okay. But whether you have a built-in support system, or you're going out and finding that community on the internet or in your social circles, it's extremely important to seek out the people, which is why I'm glad that you gave your email, because if people are going through some things, they can reach out to you, because Eric and I, this is out of our jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm.
So, whoever out there, if you're listening to this, if you have been going through something like this, or if you know someone, feel free to definitely reach out to Greg. Send us a DM, and then we'll reroute you to Greg if you would like us to use this as a buffer. But yeah, again, thank you again, G, for joining us. It's been another episode of the Chronic Couch. Yeah, any last things from you, Eric?
I'm good, man. I've been just Googling mind-body syndrome.
I will say, and if you email me, I can talk more about this to anybody listening. But
Sure.
the two books,
I will be in your inbox.
The first original book is called The Mind-Body Prescription, but it's since been like very updated. So the newest version that really helped me, and like is kind of a Bible for me, is called Unlearn Your Pain. And I'm forgetting. I think it might be Howard Schubiner, but don't quote me on that. I will be showing it to Eric after this.
All right. Let me see. Let me just get a little. Yes, Howard Schubner. It is. We're gonna correctly identify
That one.
Yeah.
Yep. That is filled with my notes. And if I ever kind of had a moment where I was just going to spiral back into concussion stuff, that would be the first thing I would open up.
Hell yeah.
There it is. Takeaway advice. Mic drop. All right, fellas. Again, thank you both. For everybody else out there, y'all know where to find us. The Chronic Couch Pod on Instagram. We'll see you next week per usual. Peace.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.
Yep.